Hello, welcome to the June 13th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is we can just simply ask, you could simply ask your questions in the live chat field, or if you want to send questions in advance, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you want to, sorry, 1 second. And while asking questions, if you want to specify which version of Cubase you're using, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information would be helpful. Also, which operating system, if you're running Mac OS or Windows, and also which version number of Cubase, so if it's version 12, 13, or 14. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends, and they'll be pinned to the top with timestamps so you can quickly navigate to particular topics. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. Also, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience. I want to give a special thanks to them. And also a special shout out to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord server. So, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. One quick programming note, I will be on vacation next Friday and the following Tuesday, so we won't be doing live streams. We'll do our next live stream Tuesday, and then we'll basically have, I'll miss the next two live streams because I'll be in vacation. So just to let everyone know, so that would be like the 20th and 24th. We will not be having our regular live streams, but we'll resume on the 27th. And just also, if you're on the live stream and you're watching live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria, Virginia, or just outside Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we see Terry Gray checking in from Minneapolis. We have Cristobal checking in. Just says, there we go again. All right, we see Jorge Oliveira checking in from Portugal. Thanks for joining us. We see Rob Schmedeke from Tarpon Springs, Florida. The artist known as Love. Okay. We have Uno Memento joining from a sunny Finland. He's working and listening today. You see Jan from Cubase Index giving Jazz Dude kudos for the fantastic Super Cubase forum, the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. All right, we have Talarista de Graffiti saying hello. All right, we have Milan Badalino checking in from a wonderful evening in Stockholm. Thanks for joining us. We have Tony Trunzo joining from Australia. We have John Barry joining from English Riviera. Dallas LaRue from Dallas, Texas, and he has a first question. Is there a way to change the file format from WAV to MP3 in Wavelab? All right, so generally, if we wanted to export as, so when we're editing audio, so basically you can't edit MP3 files. So MP3 files would need to be decoded to be edited. All right, so let me just come over here. Okay, so if we wanted to, do like an audio export, so we could now just kind of come right over here. So let's say if we have a particular audio file, and we want to export this as an MP3 file. So when we import an MP3 file, it's going to be decoded because it's going to be for an editor. But when we would come over here and we would choose our render, at this point we could say, okay, I wanted to render this, and we can see, okay, our format is our WAV file. But if we just click here, in our particular files, we could go to, so we'll just say, and then we could choose to edit a single format. So at this time we could say, okay, I want it to be a WAV, and AAC, AIFF, ALOF, FLAC, MP2, MP3, OGG Vorbis, Opus, so all these different file formats. But generally, as a file is compressed in an MP3 format, just clear my throat. As it is compressed in an MP3 format, you can't really edit the actual MP3 file. So it's going to, when it's imported, it'll be for editing purposes in a program like Wavelab. It would be basically decoded from an MP3 to a WAV so that you could do editing. But if you wanted to export, you could just choose your different file formats, like when you do the render right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Dallas. Thanks for joining us from Las Vegas. All right, we have Jitender Sharma just checking in from Dubai in the UAE. Had a good friend who moved to Dubai, family friends. All right, so Jan is saying from Cubase Index, Greg, today Greg will answer the 40,000th question before the start of the number is 39,970. Oh, guess we've been doing this a while. All right, wonderful to see Balsa, and thanks, Jan, for all of we appreciate your efforts with the Cubase Index. So Balsa just sending greetings from Montenegro, says, hope you are doing well. All right, Cristobal says that he's from Marbella, South Spain. Okay, yes, I've been to Marbella, actually. Says, I don't know why I tried to make an effect of acceleration of audio through a tempo track ramp, just the upper track, the audio one, not been affected. All right, so if we have an audio file here, so we'll just do a new project. All right, and I'll just grab an audio file. So it could be that the audio file is going to need to be placed into musical mode. So let's say if I come over here. Okay. So we have this file. All right, so when this file is not in musical mode, I can come over here. And I'm going to add a tempo track. So we'll come right over here, add our tempo track. All right, so now when we listen to our tempo, the tempo is going to speed up, but the audio is going to play back at the same rate. So what we want to do is, if we want the beat to follow the tempo changes, we need to know what the original source, what the original tempo of the file is to start with. So once we know that, and we can say, okay, this is going to be at 125 BPM, we could also just look, if you go to the pool window, media menu to pull, or control or command P, you could probably see what the tempo value is right here. And we could also, from the pool, place it into musical mode. And we could also select the event And then once the event is here, we could select event and have it be in musical mode. So now that it's in musical mode, when I draw in the Accelerando here where we speed up, we'll hear that the tempo will speed up and the loop will speed up correspondingly with it. So the audio file itself, make sure that you know what the source origin tempo is, and then you could enter that in the pool information in the definition, and you could also just place it into musical mode from the pool or directly from here. And once it's in musical mode, it will follow the tempo changes. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And I always enjoyed my time in Marbella. I think I saw a bullfight there when I was in school. All right, Soren says, hi Greg and all. Soren from Västerås, Sweden says, had my concert today, starting new pictures. It's too tricky to create a karaoke version of We Can't Get Along by East Street, so I just DJ'd the song. All right, congratulations, thanks for coming after your concert. Hope it went well. All right, and we see Michael Teams checking in from Weatherford, Texas. We have Miloš Stošić saying, hi, Greg. Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. So we see Dallas LaRue says, thanks, Greg. It was helpful. Wavelab's a hard program to figure out. And any questions that you have, just feel free to ask. I'd be happy to get you along. So it's kind of a different workflow because it's not really following kind of paradigms of like, a typical recording studio. It's more in the vein of an audio editor. So it's kind of different workflows, but incredibly powerful. All right. So we have Kingdom of Hydra sending greetings from Belgium. Thanks for joining us. All right. So we have Bratman Studios, says Rick here, says, at Ice Raids where he lives, is wishing me a happy, and all the other dads out there, happy Father's Day. He just says, I know me being a dad means a lot to you. Enjoy it as time rushes by fast. Yeah, it goes fast is such a cliche. So my son very happily completed his Lego River Steamboat set, 4,000 pieces, and could have done it in probably one day straight. All right, so we see Fly V checking in from Vince from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining. Always great to see you on. See Jazz Dude posting a link, website to different keyboard shortcuts. It's always a great way to be faster with your Cubase. All right, we see Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. It says, debating if you should avoid Washington, D.C. until Monday. I think I'm just going to stay around my neighborhood is my plan. All right, so we see Fly V is out at the cabin with his parents right now with Cubase LE. Say hi to your parents for us. All right. See, Michael Teams is granted Jan 1 gallon of Rocky Road ice cream. All right, we have LMC checking in from Johannesburg, South Africa. Michael Teams is granted 1 gallon of lemon meringue ice cream to Bratman Studio, Rick. All right, always wonderful to see Pablo Vasquez, the wonderful drummer from Hot Mess, on. This is going to another gig. Pablo says Lego. And Pablo says he wants Lego drums. Yeah. Yeah, my son could go through Lego sets so fast that we had to get like sets with lots of pieces, and those get expensive. So, all right. So we have Artist Knows Love. Give him a big thumbs up. Ball says question. Is it possible to create track lanes from audio events that are dragged from other tracks and stacked over each other. When I open up track lanes, they're stacked on the first lane. So I think, so let's say if we have this, I think, you know, if we drag parts over top, that, you know, when we go to, they don't necessarily show up in lanes. So what I would do is, like, as we come over here, I would open up the lane view and just kind of drag to a different lane. So, and once you have the lane view open, it's always going to have a different, like an available lane slot. So as soon as you add a lane, so now at this point, they will all kind of show up, and we have the option of just grabbing like our comp tool here and selecting different lanes. So we could have kind of our beat here to do stacked recordings. So you could just kind of place that. So maybe instead of dragging it on top, just open up the lane view and just drag directly into a different lane. And I think that will get you what you want to do. So let me know if that works for you, Balsa. All right, Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Tin Roof ice cream. Sounds good. Pablo is just saying my son Ryan knows. So yeah, he's kind of a Lego savant. All right, we have Rick France checking in from Pacific Northwest. All right, and I know we had a question I just want to go over from last live stream, and the question was about using, like how to use an arpeggiator, and believe it was, so I looked at the video and I wanted to show how to kind of do this particular workflow inside of Cubase. It's kind of like the Ableton arpeggiator. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So we'll do new project here. Let's create empty. And we'll just drag a vocal file over. And what I'm going to do is actually just utilize... I feel the way. I'm going to just use a sampler track. So I'm going to use a sampler track for this. And if we wanted to... All right, now when we want to do arpeggiators, as was kind of shown in the video, what I would do, now that we have the audio file in a sampler track, what I want to do now is to come over and let's load up a MIDI insert. So if we want to load up a MIDI insert, I'm going to load up the Apache SX. And right now we could have like different delay times. So if I come here, and right now it's set to 16th note, so if I wanted to come over here and do... And if we wanted to change the different rhythmic value... Now, what we could do now is just come over here. If we want smaller values, we could switch where you see the quarter note here. We're going to switch this to a clock. So now... And if we wanted to adjust these so we can do very small, or if we wanted to come over, let's make it like 200 instead. So we could now just come over and we could adjust these particular parameters. Now, if we wanted more tactile control, so we could just use kind of the mouse scroll wheel to increment and decrement the values. But if I wanted to control this with a knob, what I could do is I'm going to go to my my quick controls area, and I'm going to set my quick control. So we'll just come over here and let's say we'll go to this, we'll open up our vocals, we'll see our MIDI controller, and then I think, or if we go to MIDI channel, maybe. Okay, so let's go to right over here. So we'll see our MIDI channel, and then I think if we come here to MIDI inserts, we can go to the Arpeggi, and we're going to set our step size here for quick control 1. So now I could adjust the values here using my MIDI remote or any MIDI parameter here. So we can see that this parameter, quick control 1, is now controlling this. So if we want to and then we could also just kind of choose for this to play a little bit longer. So let's say. So we could adjust. So you want to be very fast. Or let's make it slower. So if you want to do that type of arpeggiated effects on a voice, drag the file, drag like the sample into the sampler track, come over on the MIDI inserts, go to the Arpeggi SX. We could adjust the step size here. So if you want it to be rhythmically based, or if you want it to be kind of free, just on basis of your step size in milliseconds. You could control it with a knob utilizing the quick controls, and to set the quick controls, again, we would just come over and we would see under MIDI channel, you would see inserts, go to the insert where the Arpeggi SX is and set the step input, and then you could have kind of tactile control over that to kind of mimic the arpeggiation behavior that was asked about last live stream. All right. Michael Teens has granted Pablo 1 gallon of nougat ice cream. Rick Francis saying hello to myself and all Cubase users. Great to see Tim K checking in from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat buddy is waving a paw hello to other cats in the area. All right, so we see Val from Vienna says he was in the Viennese concert hall again, and you might notice the preset in Reverence. So I always wanted to go to concert hall in Vienna, so hopefully one day I'll be able to make it out there. All right, so we see from Val, says, sorry to bother you here with this, Greg, but I have every 5 minutes an error in Cubase 14 Win 11 with kernel-base.dll. What could that be? Dump file readout doesn't show anything special, just kernel. So sometimes when, you know, if it's like every 5 minutes, I wonder if it could be related to maybe like a USB power saving mode. So sometimes if USB devices don't have activity for 5 minutes or after 5 minutes, what they can do is, because there's obviously power and energy that's going out of the USB bus to power devices. But sometimes those USB buses could be put on into like an eco or energy friendly or power saving or green mode, where like at a certain time that they will kind of throttle and kind of hold back the throughput, and that could have issues for different USB peripherals such as MIDI controllers, audio interfaces, and other, USB hard drives. So I would check to see, if it's something that's happening consistently at around 5 minutes. It could be something that's being kind of throttled down. So if you go into your BIOS, if you're running on Windows, make sure that you don't have your USB ports are always set to full power. So give that a try. Always wonderful to see Gareth Kitch on from Bilbao, Spain. All right. Gareth Kitch asks, just history questions. Sir Greg, could you tell us the history and creation of the adoption of ASIO? So ASIO is originally developed around 95, 96. So when VST first came out, I think it was 95 or 96. At that point, people would have to utilize the audio drivers that were available for Mac OS and Windows, and those drivers were often not really designed for full duplexing, meaning that the audio could be recorded or the audio could play back, but most of the audio interfaces at that time couldn't record and monitor at the same time. So early on, it was like full duplexing, and there was significant amounts of latency. So when we first came out with ASIO, and ASIO was developed by Steinberg, and it's an acronym for Audio Stream Input Output. So what we did is basically said, okay, we're going to have a direct communication with the audio driver, with the audio interface, with the driver that bypasses the operating system, so that we could significantly minimize latency. And we opened that up as a standard for all of the hardware companies. And before this, there was just a handful of like audio interface manufacturers. It was pretty rare. So you had DigiDesign at the time. You had, at a Minneapolis area, you had Digital Audio Labs, and they had Card D, which was a digital card. You had Sound Blaster cards, which were kind of almost seen as like, what you didn't necessarily want for like a professional recording, but maybe for playing back sounds for games. At one point, Sound Blaster cards were selling at 100,000 units per day when people were adding them to their computers before they were all built in. So Steinberg came out with this method so that we could have low latency communication with the audio interface. And we introduced other aspects of ASIO, such as synchronization purposes, because when ASIO first came out, there was a lot of people using ADATs and like DA88 kind of modular tape machines, digital modular tape machines. So we added the ability for it to do proper synchronization between those two devices. When OS X came out on the Mac OS platform, so I think in 2001, OS X incorporated something called Core Audio. Now, Core Audio is very, very similar, and we'll say perhaps truly inspired by ASIO. So with that, since it was now a low-level latency on audio driver architecture in Mac OS, what we did for Cubase is to write an ASIO driver to Core Audio translation. It's that similar. So on the Mac, generally we have Core Audio, and on the Windows platform, it's still ASIO is the dominant scheme. And because now there was low latency audio performance available in architecture, at that point, just a whole industry of audio interfaces were now available, and Steinberg for the goodness of the industry. You know, we opened up VST. We don't realize any revenue from people that make VST plugins. We don't realize revenue from people that make ASIO drivers, but it makes it a better architecture for the entire industry. So, and you know, I think Steinberg learned about the dangers of having a multitude of standards where there is no standard, from the Atari platform, from MIDI timing. So Dr. T's had a MIDI timing engine. eMagic had a, eMagic had their own MIDI real-time, MIDI timing engine, and Steinberg had their own, and it just kind of fragmented the whole market. So with ASIO, it's a very reliable standard. It allows you to do like high, super high resolution audio. So some core audio devices, I don't think core audio actually supports natively like resolutions of 32-bit integer 384K, for instance. So that's just kind of a quick history of ASIO and how it's been implemented and used. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Gareth. Great. Uno's received 1 gallon of key lime pie ice cream from Michael Teams. Gareth is saying the poor vocalist is being punished big time. All right, so Bratman Studio says, hey Greg, can I split my Groove Agent drum channels? I noticed kick 2, snare 3, etc. I noticed that the Groove Agent channel listed may not have drums, but will have reverbs, delays, etc. on the master. Can I put those on other channels too? So yeah, let's take a look. So we'll do it with a acoustic agent kit. Okay. All right, so if you were doing like an acoustic agent kit, we may notice that, when we're playing back our different sounds, let's say, okay, I want to take my kick, and we're going to take this from our kit mix to output 2, let's say our snare to output 3. Now we also have room mics. So let's say if we are here and we look at the instrument. So right now we could see if we adjust the room and overhead. And we may also, and when we get to the mixer, we could have kind of like our room and overheads. So right now we see just going on a kick, but if we wanted to route our overheads to different outputs, so let's say we want to do this, our overheads to outputs 5 and 6. Let's go back to my kit and I'll turn on overhead. Now you may also have our reverb. So let's say if we come over here to our aux ends. So right now we can see our reverb. So let's go ahead and we'll just emphasize the reverb in the mixer here. So let's add. So when I go to my aux ends, we see our reverb here that we could just send this out to output 8. So now as we go to look at our mix console, let's say for our devices here, and if we solo, let's say our effects end, so here's just a reverb. The overheads, let's say the room mics. Our close mics on snare. But when we do these all together, so to get the effects out to a completely different output, just go into the mixer, and then you'll see the agent, go to the aux sends, and then you could route these out to different outputs entirely. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Michael Teams has granted Gareth 1 gallon of Get Well strawberry ice cream to him and his daughter Lola. We hope you're feeling better, Gareth. All right, so we have Tiago joining. All right. Gareth is saying that the vocalist previously was shouting Pobs for Pablo. All right, Pablo's just says, question, when I have multiple takes on a track or several, can I convert each one into track versions? Sometimes I record 2 or 3 takes on the same track. So yeah, so let me go ahead and I'll just do a quick recording here, and we'll do some track versions. So I'll do multiple passes here. So I'll add an audio track, and I'll just let me just make sure I have all of my output routing. So okay, so I want to do a couple of different passes and convert the lanes into versions. All right, so I'm going to add a quick Groove Agent instrument here. Okay. All right, so and now I'm going to add just an audio track, and we're going to set the instrument, the input from Groove Agent here. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to record the audio here, and we'll do different passes, and all right, so let's say we now have 4 takes. We'll just, all right, so we have our multiple takes, and now we want to convert these into track versions. So I think if we just go to the project menu and we go to our track versions, we could say create versions from lanes. So again, just from the project menu, track versions, and then we're going to create track versions from lanes. So now once we kind of come over here, we could see track version 1, and you may have to, when we do this, just to unmute those, and we could just see our different lanes were automatically converted to our track versions. So as we do this, we can just this not follow the transport. So now these are all in different versions. So once you have your versions, and then if you wanted to go back, just go to your project menu to track versions. We can create versions from lanes or create lanes from versions, so we could kind of go back and forth between the two of them. So give that a try. So go to the project menu and then create versions from lanes, or the opposite. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Pablo. All right, so we see Randy from Radar, the band from Dallas, Fort Worth area, just saying howdy, and his coffee is acquired. All right, Tiago just asked, question, pardon my ignorance, what is the difference between the plug-in stereo enhancer and mono to stereo? So I think the stereo enhancer will just open it up, just make sure, let's say, just slow the tempo down in this. All right, so this is going to kind of take so I think we have, let's go ahead and open up the mono to stereo. So I think that this is really kind of maybe taking, we can see that this isn't necessarily, it's kind of making it like a mono source into more stereo. So let's say if I take just try it on a different track and one that may be mono, where I have mono and stereo together. All right, so say, let's say I have this on a mono source.
I'm on the outside looking in. You put the close side up on your heart. All the lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go?
So you could hear this could be more, sometimes more of a chorusing effect. It may be intended for mono tracks. I'm uninvited. And if we're on a stereo track, we could take something that's maybe we wanted to take that was more stereo and make it more mono sounding. So, or kind of do the opposite here. And now if we go to our stereo enhancer,
very last one to leave.
So they'll be pretty similar.
I plan on loving you forever. Didn't you see the way I looked at you?
I think that this would be more for like overall. I would maybe use this for individual tracks, and let's say for the stereo enhancer, if I wanted to kind of do this.
I fell right through. I'd do it all for
you know, if I wanted like the overall mix to be more kind of stereo.
you.
So say we'll turn
Now
this
I'm
off.
uninvited. On the outside looking in. You put the close side up on your heart. All the lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?
So I would probably use this more on like more multi-track material versus let's say we go mono to stereo if we're on a stereo bus. So you can see that when that's inserted, we can make it. So this may be better for kind of making something sound more mono. You could bring out stereo, but you may get some phase issues, and sometimes that could be nice. But similar concepts, but I would maybe use the stereo enhancer overall for like multi-track And maybe if I wanted something to be more narrow sounding, I would probably use the mono to stereo to make it more mono. All right. All right, Soren asks, Greg, can I ask a very technical question about YouTube Content ID? If you play something that has Content ID, are you sure that this Hangout would be blocked, or what implications is it? So when I've had like a Content ID notice, one of the things that they will do is they will send you a message and say, oh, there's a Content ID. So ironically, I got a Content ID in one of the videos I did where I was showing how to do like a bass sample, and I would just play one single note on a bass, and then I recorded each fret on each string, and so that we could show how to build a bass instrument inside of Halion. And that got a big content strike. So when you get a content strike, what often happens is you'll get a notice, and at that point they will run ads on your video, whether you want it to be monetized or not. And they run ads, I think, so that in case anyone reaches out to them seeking financial compensation, that they have a pool of money to draw from. So often the first step is that they will put an ad in your video so that when the video plays, that they could collect revenue on it. So if no one does a content strike on it, at that point, they still collect money and they collect ads from, or revenue from the ads. Sometimes people, and I've been in this situation before where someone will use a loop from the license-free, royalty-free content, and they will get notified of a content strike, and it's kind of probably like an AI process, I assume. And sometimes it could be, okay, I used the same loop that's freely available. Someone else just kind of got the content ID associated with their project first. So they may reach, so if you get a content strike notification, you can say, I use this open source, drum loop or this open source loop, and it's the same that this other person did. And often they'll reach out to the other person, and every time I've been involved with it, the other person has said, okay, yeah, I used the same freely available loop, and then it gets kind of dropped. So the first step is often YouTube will run ads on your videos to try to get revenue in case they have to do any payment. Some artists are very proactive with any content strikes. So some artists can be more active than others, but usually the first thing is they will just immediately put an ad in your video, whether you want it or not, and at that point they will realize revenue, and then if it goes farther, they could take your video down. So that's why I kind of use the same songs over and over, because these are all kind of content and content free without any restrictions for me to use. So hope that makes sense. All right. All right, my chat field moved on me, so I guess Val could do his drinking game. Okay. All right, so I'm back to where it was. All right. All right. Ara online says, how can I cut a one long note into short 30-second notes using the scissors tool? Okay. Okay, so let's say we have one long note here. Okay, now when we want to use the scissors tool, if you hold down the Alt or Option, so I have this note selected, we'll make it a little larger so it's really obvious, and I cut at a certain interval. So let's say from the start of the note, and I want to come here, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key with the scissors tool, and then I could make even interval cuts. So if we wanted to do 30-second notes, I could set my quantize value here to 30-second notes. Let's zoom in. So I could just come right over here, hold down my Alt or Option key while clicking at a 30-second note. And then you could just simply make your cuts at even intervals. So instead of having to cut each one individually, which is great if you get paid by the hour, but if you wanted to just come here and cut just like that, you can just make even cuts on 30-second notes. So lots of film composers will do this and move various notes up or down. So let's say you just come here, go up, just use your arrow keys, and now you could write like a quick kind of sequence just like that. So again, to take one long note and split it, just hold down, select the scissors tool, hold down the Alt or Option key, and split at the interval that you want. So this is a 30-second note, and that will automatically split the note, the long note, into multiple 30-second notes or whatever division based upon the length of the first cut. All right, we have Paul Claypool saying hello and wishing everyone a happy Friday from Burbank. Spent a lot of time in Burbank over the years. All right, Mr. Bob Gamer says, can you convince me why Cubase over FL Studio? So I think Cubase, I'm not that familiar with FL Studio, but I think, a lot of programs kind of pigeonhole you into particular workflows. And I think Cubase does a really good job of, like FL Studio, you probably wouldn't do, my perception is you probably wouldn't do a movie soundtrack, but maybe like programming beats and stuff like that, maybe making some pop, R&B, hip-hop type stuff, I think is a common user group of FL Studio. But if you try to get out of that, then you're kind of limited with functionality. Whereas I think Cubase really defines the feature sets for all the other programs, so like Cubase has been around, is the oldest DAW, and it's the most advanced, most mature, the most streamlined. But if, things that we take for granted today, Cubase pioneered, like being able to edit your music while it played. We take that for granted now. Steinberg pioneered that. Steinberg invented VST. Steinberg invented ASIO. Steinberg invented the whole concept of the project window where we could see all of our different parts kind of laid out for us here. So we could see when parts come in, go out. We invented right-clicking to access tools, or first DAW music sequencer to do that. Again, we invented the whole concept of VST so we could utilize your computer's processors. So every company uses, just about every company uses VST plugins. Every plugin manufacturer makes VST. Everything we do is, better optimizations for Mac processors and Windows processors. So even if you're running on Windows ARM, we have released versions. We're going to have better notation, better virtual instruments, more robust MIDI editing. We could, stuff like we're the first DAW to incorporate Dolby Atmos. So all these kind of concepts, first one to incorporate like a drum editor to incorporate a chord track. And we also have like really great support because we like our customers, and we offer 8 hours of live Q&A sessions so that, per week, so that you could use your Cubase more effectively and learn it better. But I think that Cubase doesn't restrict your particular workflow. And it's, whether you're doing hip hop, whether you're doing EDM, whether you're doing film soundtracks for Oscar winning films, you're doing TV work, you're doing video games, you're just writing a song, Cubase has amazing workflow for all of those things. And again, it's not kind of predisposing you to a particular workflow. Like Teddy Riley is always really good. He's like, he'll hear someone's track and he's like, oh, yeah, that's great. You used Ableton on that. How'd you know? Oh, you used FL Studio. How'd you know? And he just knows, one, by the sound, and because people tend to use the same tools in those programs. Whereas Cubase is a bit more liberating in that, it has a lot more options. And maybe if you're doing a hip hop thing, you could use a trick like, okay, I just want to split the notes like a film composer would do. I need to print this out for a string section. All those things you could do inside of Cubase that you might not be able to do as easily in other programs. All right. And our community is also really great. And we hope to see you on more live streams, Mr. Bob Gamers. And welcome to the Club Cubase live stream. All right. We see Val just says, hope Greg is right about the power save. I had this before and fixed it through that, as remember, but thought it's fixed. So it could be like a BIOS update or something like that could reset those settings. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston on, checking in from London. All right, so we see Balsa just asked, hey Greg, can the sample trick with the ARP MIDI insert that you just showed be controlled with modifiers instead of quick control? So I don't think that the actual that the MIDI plugins are modulatable. So, but you might be able to. Yes, I don't think the modulators work on the MIDI plugins. But let's. But maybe if we assign it to, and we might be able to. Let's see if we could assign the Auto LFO plugin to do it. So let me just. So I don't think that the modulators will do that. But let me just see if we have this on a sampler track. So, but yeah, so I don't think that the MIDI plugins are, so, we could modulate parameters in like VST effects, but I don't think it's going to, to do it for plugin parameters. So let's say if we come over here to our modulators, and let's see if we come over here, we add the parameter. Yeah, so it's not going to, let's see if, we had it on like a Groove Agent SE. But as you can see, when we go to like the modulators, and if we go to learn, that it's not going to. So if I come here, we learn, and we adjust the parameters. So it's going to be only for like not MIDI plugins. So I don't think that that's going to work. So that's why you could control it with the quick link. And I don't think that we could modulate the quick link as well, or the quick control. So we could do different MIDI controllers for the channels. So, but I don't think it's that it'll work. I was kind of playing around with it some more, but I'll play around with it a little more over the weekend. All right, Matt Elston's received 1 gallon of cookies and creams ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, so we see from Alexander's this question, how to convert prepared patterns from Simon Phillips to the new drum editor. If I drag the pattern, the MIDI, it's automatically shown in the MIDI part. Any chance to convert it to the drum edit? So we could convert like a pattern. So let's say if we go to, so let's load up a quick Simon Phillips kit here. So currently we could take a pattern into a MIDI event, but not a MIDI event into a pattern. Now the patterns can be a little more, could have kind of more features beyond what a typical, what MIDI is capable of, like being able to play simultaneously forwards and backwards. So let me just load up quick Simon Phillips. All right. All right, and adjust my control room volume up. So right now, you know, if we have a pattern, so, and if, let's say, so if we come over here, we could go to like the, to the drum machine, we could add our drum machine here. And again, remember that this can, you know, go beyond kind of what, you know, the pattern editor could do stuff that the MIDI editor can't. So we could kind of translate it down. So let's say I will come over to the editor here. I'll just randomize a quick pattern. So when I come over here, I could drag this pattern out to the pattern, and we could convert that to MIDI, which is what a lot of people kind of want to do. But with the, if we come over here, let's say to this particular pattern, what I could do is drag this pattern over. So, but we can't take the MIDI part into into the pattern editor, but we could take the pattern editor and convert it to MIDI. So there's some technical stuff that this does, like, okay, well, I'm playing this particular pattern. So let's say I want to now come over here and reverse the direction of this particular sound. So this one sound is playing backwards while the others are playing forward or alternating. So we could just kind of take this sound and one is playing forward while one is playing backward. One could also have a different number of steps. So we could do kind of polyrhythms and say, okay, I want this to have 9 steps versus 16 steps, and I want this to have 11 steps, and play back and alternate in different directions. So, you know, this isn't capable. Maybe in the future we'll be able to kind of import MIDI directly into the pattern editor, but it's kind of a separate entity currently. All right, so we see from Garrett says, in ASIO is PC only, Mac uses a different system. So Mac uses Core Audio, and I would say it's very, very, very similar to ASIO. So we see Garrett just says, well done, Steiny, for ASIO. So we think standards are good for the industry. So there's lots of VST manufacturers and audio interface companies that have, you know, been able to be in existence because of the Steinberg created standards of VST and ASIO. All right, Quellen just says, hello, Greg. How to split the work between CPU cores if I have 10 inserts on a group of drums to route this group to another group and put there 5 of the plugins which are in the first group. So that could work. But, you know, so, you know, each group, you know, and it's just how processing has to occur. So if you wanted to split the, you know, the particular drums into different groups, that would help with your different CPU, with your audio performance. All right, so we see Jazz Dude just says the Steinberg IXO22 audio interface supports ASIO and Mac OS, providing low latency audio performance. So it's with these Steinberg interfaces, this is what someone mentioned to me like 15 years ago or so at Steinberg, just an off-the-cuff conversation. So, you know, one of the limitations of core audio is you don't have direct monitoring. So by default, you'd have to enable it in the audio interface control panel. So with I think that the Steinberg interfaces, and I could be mistaken about this, but the Steinberg interfaces are actually using kind of like an ASIO on Mac, but they all come with core audio drivers as well. But technically, it may be running a little more efficiently because we're communicating directly with that. All right, so we see Tim K just said, ASIO, could that technology be adapted for two-way radio broadcasting? That's something the whole entire world needs, a way to, so radios won't walk on each other, maybe a Steinberg opportunity. So I'm not sure if the radios are actually using, like I have friends that are in a ham radio, but I'm not sure if they're using like an audio interface of the computer for that, or if it's, you know, kind of using, you know, different radio broadcasting frequencies for that. So, but I'll mention it. All right, so we see no please. It says my stereo bus is playing in mono when I use it as an insert. It's wired in stereo. It has 2 channels in ADAT. And then to my Apollo, is it possible there's a Cubase setting doing this? So let's say if we are, there's a couple things that it could be. Let me just import quick. Okay. So let's say if we're playing, just turn it off. All right, so just saying my stereo bus is playing mono when I use it as an insert. It's wired in stereo to... Okay, let me just see if this was going back to the mono to stereo question, just so I know it when I use it as an insert. All right, let me just see if I could find the first question. Just okay, so just for no please, maybe it says my stereo bus is playing a mono when I use it as an insert. It's wired in stereo to 2 channels in ADAT. And then to my Apollo, is it possible there's a Cubase setting doing this? So let's say if we go to the stereo bus here. So if you're hearing mono, so I'm not sure what the it is. So it says when I use it as an insert. So let's come over here, and so something that can make it sound mono is just to come over. Let's say if you go to the down mix presets, so if you listen to the mono here, you could switch between mono and stereo here. Now let's come over. Let's say we go to the mix console, and maybe this is related to the mono to stereo. So that can make it sound more mono. Or if you're doing the stereo enhancer. So you could do kind of enhancement there. So those could be things. Now, if you're going, it's wired in stereo to 2 channels in ADAT. And then to my Apollo. So I'm not sure if it's, if when it say it's going into the Apollo, are you monitoring through the Apollo to the ADAT connection? But if you give me a little more information, no, please, I'd be happy to try to help. All right, wonderful to see Vishnu on from India. Thanks for joining us. All right, Quellen asks, is it normal if I put every straight to the Nova in VariAudio, that the bouncing voice and reopen at VariAudio, that the notes are a little out of the grid, but it sounds processed like I did before? Let me just see if there's a follow-up with that. All right. So it could be, all right, so let's go to VariAudio. All right. So if it's normally put every note straight to the note of VariAudio after bouncing the voice and reopen the VariAudio, the notes are a little out of the grid, but it sounds processed like I did before. So let's say if I come here to all right, let me just. So if it's kind of like if we went straight, so when you say, if I put every straight to the note via VariAudio, so let's say if it's straight, maybe it's this setting here. All right, so so when we come here, so let's say if you bounce the voice here, all right, and I'm just going to okay, so I will now flatten the real-time processing here. So now we have the bounced voice. If we come over here, we would need to do our VariAudio analysis of it again. All right, the notes are a little out of the grid, but it sounds processed like I did before. So let's go ahead and just do our analysis. So it seems like everything is. So it seems like everything is pretty similar. Let's look at our original VariAudio. We see that some of the notes here are early. We'll go back to our other track version before we process the VariAudio, and we can see that the placement of the notes is still off here by about the same amount. So it doesn't seem like it's affecting it rhythmically to me, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Quellen. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio, just says, Greg, that's a ticket. I just need to right click on everything more often. All right. All right. So we're seeing kind of more discussion with Core Audio and ASIO. So I believe, and I could be mistaken on this, that we basically use ASIO to link into Core Audio. So, but all the Core Audio drivers into the end user, everything would be perceived as being a Core Audio driver. It's just how Cubase kind of does the handshake to Core Audio is using ASIO. So, all right. Okay, fingers on strings. It says, for multiple audio tracks and mixing, is there an alternative to the fader controller, or do you recommend buying a fader at a reasonable price? How to connect to be accessible in Cubase? Okay. So if you wanted to mix, so, if, there's a couple of different approaches. One, a lot of people may mix one track at a time, and that's perfectly fine. If you wanted to take a number of tracks and say, okay, I need to control multiple tracks all at once, you could do that very easily. So you could say, okay, I want to control these tracks. You could enable Q-Link. If you wanted to get a controller, you could use something in a MIDI remote. A really inexpensive controller that I'm quite fond of is the Korg Nano Control. So now this gives me 8 faders. It's actually on my 27-inch screen. This is about the actual physical size, so it fits on your desk. And now if I go into, let's say, a project that's mostly audio based, I could put it into mixer mode. And now I could have 8 faders. So if I wanted to mix multiple sources together all at once, I could move the faders that are on my, or any MIDI fader box. I could come over here, move these units. So I'm moving these physically on. And if I wanted to mix, 8 channels or 16 channels, whatever, you could just get multiple units like this. Excuse me, and have kind of real tactile control if you wanted to do. So it's just connecting it via USB. If it's a Korg Nano Control, it's automatically recognized by Cubase, and you really don't have to do anything. I think in the US it sells for $79 or so. All right, so you see Gareth says, create lanes from versions, and versions from lanes is his revelation of the day. Pablo's gonna try it next week. He says recording drums for Hot Mess can be messy. Understand. All right, so we see from No Please, it says, adding to my previous question, it's a hardware compressor. All right, so let me, also someone told me that there's a Cubase setting to use ADAT as stereo. Is that true? So in that physical connection, often an ADAT connection port, which is like a Toslink optical, can either function as a stereo SPDIF, or it could function as an 8-channel ADAT at 48K, or 4 channels at 96K, 2 channels at 192K. So it's not a Cubase setting, but it's going to be a setting in your audio interface, whether you want an optical connection port to be used as stereo or mono. Now let me scroll back up to your previous question. It says, my stereo bus is playing a mono and I use it as an insert. I guess so. It's wired in stereo to 2 channels in ADAT and then to my Apollo. And then my Apollo, is it possible there's a Cubase setting? So it's probably going to, make sure that when you are working with your external compressor, that the actual, and it could be, if it's only in mono, it could be that the optical port is defined as a SPDIF, like S/PDIF, which stands for Sony Philips Digital Interface. As opposed to, it could be like maybe you're expecting it to be SPDIF and it's functioning as an ADAT light pipe. So it could be on hardware, it could be a switch, or it could be probably in your audio interface where you toggle back and forth. I know like the Steinberg MR816s, the AXRs, and the 816C, UR816C, which all have ADAT, allow you to choose whether that port is an optical connection, whether your optical connection is SPDIF or ADAT light pipe, and that would switch it from 2 channels to 8 channels. All right, Gregory Malik asks, I've heard some great and also bad stuff said about the Cubase and the Nectar Panorama CS12. What are your thoughts? I haven't played with it myself, but I have lots of friends. I was just speaking with my friend Fred Corey, who just got one, and he really likes his. I've heard a lot of positive things about it, so maybe some of the negative things were before they incorporated like the Cubase support for the MIDI remote, but it seems like overall it's been pretty positively received. But maybe if someone has firsthand experience, they could chime in to give some perspective to Gregory on their impressions. All right. So Tiago just says, thanks, Greg. All right, so we see Gulf Coast Florida Man says, I look forward to the next stream because I now own Cubase and will install it on my computer tomorrow. I'm sure I'll have questions. Congratulations. And welcome to the Steinberg family. And we hope to see you on many more live streams so we can help get you up to speed. All right. All right, so we have Christian saying hello from France. I'm sure I would pronounce your last name wrong. But thanks for joining us. All right, scroll up to my list here. Okay, all right, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so Christian's questions. I have several audio interfaces used for different usages. When I open up a project needing a different interface, I have to set all this new interface. All right, let me just, okay, let's see the first question. Do you think next version of Cubase could allow to attach audio interface to project rather than globally on Cubase instance? You know, so I think that, you know, some settings are always going to be global so that, you know, when you know, so that audio will be routed and will be maintained. What I would try to do if you're running into issues is maybe just come over, and when you go to like your audio connections, just go to your inputs and outputs, and once you have and maybe even before you open up the project, if you just start with like an empty project, you know, maybe if you save those as presets for this interface, save it as presets for other interfaces. But this way we could say, okay, the inputs and outputs are there and the control room. So if we saved the audio for, you know, if you think about it, if you save the audio IO for the project, and then let's, you know, very typical scenarios like, okay, I'm working with my laptop in my studio and I plug it into my studio interface and I want to do edits on, you know, without the interface connected, just using like headphones on a laptop. Then in that scenario, if you saved those settings not globally, then it wouldn't work for, you know, you would have to reconfigure every single time for whenever you change the audio interface. So this way, if it's global, I don't, you know, and I change it for one song for, I'm using my headphones and I'm mixing outside on my deck, enjoying the beautiful day and weather. And I load up a different project, that those settings will persist. So, you know, so when we go to different environments, you may want, you know, not to have to take everything that is going to route the audio out to the currently selected interface or hardware that you have without having to do that for every single project. But I think if you wanted to help with that, if you save presets for each of your interfaces, then you could just simply open up the preset as well. But again, thinking of the scenario of, I want to play back my audio, but that audio hardware that's defined in the project isn't available, what should Cubase do? So that's why it kind of does it globally, so it can capture and work with any of your with your current hardware setup. All right. See Best Green Jesus lurking. I see someone referencing him. See, Soren says, nice, Greg, about the content ID. I understand now. So, yeah. See, we have Gulf Coast, Florida man. Just says he's in Florida in USA. Just curious what part of Florida you're in. So, spent a lot of time in Tampa and Fort Myers. I used to rep there. All right, we see Pablo just saying Greg Groove. All right, so we see Christian just asked another question more concerning web store than Cubase itself. Why French people can't pay using Clama when German, Spanish, Italian, other EU people can. I pay with Clama on many other sites. So I will pass that on to kind of our European sales. To see if they have any insights, but it's handled by, I think, a company called Fast Spring. So I don't know all the currencies in different countries that it works with, but I could pass it on as a request for them. All right, Dan Stenhouse just says, hi, Greg, do you think the developers will ever be able to create a saved presets for external effects? It seems like a pretty obvious feature request. I know that some people for the external instruments and external effects will come over here and, add, when we come over, you could right-click and add to favorites so that they could be recalled. It seems like a big obvious omission to me as well, so I haven't gotten a great answer on that, but I would like to save each of these individually and to save these globally as a preset. I think makes sense. I don't see any harmful consequences with that, but I'll reiterate the request. All right, Gareth is saying Cubase is mature like Greg. It says, in fact, Cubase is constantly slapping his wrist because he's infantile. All right. See, Val is just saying he's pretty sure he could hear different DAWs too. I think it's more about the way of composing because Ableton and FL have kind of a lazy composing way. I'm sure you could do other stuff, but see, kind phrase from Pablo says, I've learned more in these 5 years with Greg than my entire life using Cubase before. That's very kind of you, Pablo. All right, so we see Dan Stenhouse says, hi, Greg and Arp. A couple of feature requests would be great if VariAudio remembered your XY zoom settings rather than defaulting to the smallest zoom on every new instance. All right, so let's come over here. Let's say if I go into my VariAudio. All right, so let's say if I come here. All right, so let's say measure 8. And we'll just navigate. So let's say we have this as our zoom. All right. All right, so let's come over here. Okay, so let's say I open up my guitar part. Let's go to my bass part here. Yeah, so it is different. I think it tries to give you kind of optimum zoom settings for the content, but I'll pass that along as a feature request as well. See, Balsa just says, for younger cats, I just watched a Rick Beato interview with Zed. He mentioned he uses Cubase for his EDM pop. Yep, so I've been to Zed's house a few times. It's kind of cool. He's got a great house. Really nice view. So, nice guy, too. All right, so we see Tim K says this is a great community. I think I've been here now, and gosh, I sure as heck won't be promoted to lifeguard anytime soon, but at least I could tread water. So. All right, Dan Stenhouse says, secondly, my workflow demands changing buffer rates often. It'd be nice to be able to assign a key command to this. The only level you can change is to opening studio setup. So that's a part of Cubase that's not actually in Cubase. So when we open that window, we're not in Cubase when we adjust the buffer size for the audio interface. We kind of go to the operating system or for the ASIO driver, but it's not part of Cubase, which is why you could open a window to get there, and that takes you, once you go to change the buffer size, then you're outside of Cubase. You adjust it in the control panel or the app or the mixer app for the audio interface, and then you go back into Cubase once it's set. So it's not actually in Cubase, which is why there isn't a key command to do that, because it's like having a key command in Cubase for Microsoft Word or something like that. And I know it's kind of more related than that, but it's not a part of Cubase, which is why you need why there isn't a key command currently. Gareth is just saying the range of people who use it or Cubase are a testament to Hans Zimmer to Ian Kirkpatrick. Yeah, I remember Ian, we actually filmed, we did 2 different videos with Ian. We did Ian the first day and Hans the next day, if you watch him on the Steinberg Spotlight series. So, and Ian was all excited, it's like, oh, please tell Hans I said hi. We had the same, I think they had the same trainer, or they did at the time. All right, Ryan Thomas says, hi Greg, how do I sign up for Cubase beta testing? So a lot of times if you make comments and participate in the Steinberg forums, you may be invited into the beta group, and sometimes the beta group isn't necessarily, when you're doing testing, it isn't necessarily about what you want or how you want a feature. It's like, these are the features and we're going to test the implementation. We could, enhance, change this, and change workflows. So it's not necessarily always like a feature request thing, and you hope that your feature request wins. But it's kind of testing what is being provided for the next version. So, and also if you want to email me what you would consider a beta report. So it's often being very methodical. Like I ran into this and I did these 6 steps in this, in this specific order to get here, and it doesn't do this. And, it's a difference between maybe a feature not working or a feature not working as you expect it to, but still functioning for a particular purpose. So, but if you want to send, create what you would consider a beta report and send it to me, I could pass it on to the team as well. But, make comments in the official Steinberg forums, and that's how a lot of people will get kind of invited into the beta program, I think. Great. Okay. All right, reading through comments. See, the artist known as Love says he uses Cubase. That's good. All right, Tim K says, if I think about it, though, all the elements included with Cubase, if you want all that 50 years ago, it would be unfathomably expensive. All the real-world gear we not have in VSTs. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I used to always, like when Cubase VST came out, and it came out initially, it was 32 tracks, and then I would always kind of make the point, it's like, okay, by the time you have 32 tracks of tape and you have, 8 effects units, you have 32 compressors, and you have all these components. Those like the cables to connect all those different hardware units together for the same functionality cost twice as much as the program. And everyone's like, oh, good point. All right, you see Pablo stealing my drum pattern. Gareth is saying, reiterating, says about the standard non-standards is true. All right. We see Pablo has to go. He's running out of battery on his phone. Thanks for joining us, Pablo. All right, Joe asks, or J.O., hi Greg, automation. When you write an EQ, for example, I go to select a parameter and all I get are the parameters of the EQ in view, which causes other automations to be omitted. Okay, so one easy way to kind of, if you want to see all the automation, so let's say we go to the automation panel, which we could access kind of right here. And there's a function that we could just say reveal parameter on write. So if you go to the settings, so if you hit, and you could also access this automation panel by hitting F6. Go to settings to reveal on write. So if you are coming over here and then you feel like you're searching constantly for, okay, I come over here and I want to go to my channel strip, to EQ, to EQ1. So if you don't want to kind of mouse surf for that, we could come over here and say, okay, when I write automation, so as soon as I move the parameter, so I have EQ3, what I want to do is come over here. So let me make sure I have that reveal parameter on write checked. All right. So now, as we go to automate, so if I automate, that would help. So now I click on the W. So now I see my EQ3 gain frequency. Let's adjust our Q. So now anytime that I touch a parameter, it's automatically going to show up and reveal itself automatically there. So, and again, so if you don't want to hunt for all of the parameters, you could just come right over here and reveal the parameter automation on right. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And so you see just kind of a further follow-up comment with this is this means if I want to go back to the reverb automation, for example, I have to constantly add to what I want to see and use. So if I now automated the reverb send, we can see it's just automatically going to all show up here. And there's also, if I come, so let's say if I have all of my parameters, we could just come, if we go to the automation panel again, all you have to do is just say show used automation, and that would open up all of the automation, so just from the automation panel. So, and if you wanted to just come here and say, okay, I just want to see volume automation, so we're here, let's show the volume automation, let's show EQ automation, let's show sends. So you could just pick your parameters that you want to view right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. See, Jazz Dude just says, some friends of mine have an old school 80s studio. They made millions in the 80s, and I know what they paid for their EMT plate reverb or the first PCM recording machine in the late 80s. Yeah, it's sad when you see like a Sony 3348 selling for $1,500, you know, knowing that that cost like $100,000 back in the day. So, all right. All right, so we see from JO, says, is there any way removing this EQ from the list, for example, so I cannot choose other automations without having to constantly more and add. All right, so let's say if I come here, let's add an effect send. All right, so put a chorus on here. And let's add, let's say volume automation. And let's add panning on our bass. Okay, so now again, we could see, so go to, we could select a track, go to your automation here, just say, okay, I just want to see my send automation. I want to see the EQs. I want to see only the pan. I want to see the volume. So now we could just kind of come right over here and I want to see my inserts, sends, dynamics. So you could just come right over there and see all your automation kind of broken down by category. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Jo or Joe. All right, wonderful to see Roland stuff, checking in from Sussex and the south coast of England. Always wanted to go to that area. I was talking to my friend John Barron, who lives, I think, pretty close to there, near Isle of Wight that's in the south. All right, so you see Tim Gay, it just says, regarding radio broadcasting idea, think aviation from Tenerife to DC. No, maybe they're just using digital interfaces today, but maybe if they were, just for the tech team to ponder. All right. Okay, so we see no please just says as soon as I insert the hardware, it plays in mono. So I guess this from no please. So, check also your connections. So let's say, if it is, all right, so let's, make sure that when you go to your audio connections for your external effects, make sure that here you have the stereo in and, the stereo in and out. So, if we're, so you want to make sure check these connections on your send bus and your return bus to make sure that those are set correctly. If one of those is set incorrectly, that could yield a mono output. And check to see if the unit is connected via ADAT light pipe, or if it's so if it's connected via ADAT light pipe, you may only get one channel, or make sure that it's set to toss link from the particular area right there. And it could also be, the last thing I would look for is, let's say maybe so let's say if you get to the input output channels, it's probably, if it's switching to stereo, but make sure that this is your stereo out is set to stereo. But my guess would be that one of these routing connections is going to be set wrong here. So check just those output connections. And it could also be, and also if you try toggling direct monitoring, depending on your audio interface, that could maybe not be outputting also. So try toggling direct monitoring and see if that makes a difference. And if you could let me know, what hardware it is, if it has digital connections, or if you're going into an interface that's connected via ADAT, that would be helpful too. And make sure also that when you have it, your audio connections here, so if it, make sure that's a stereo compressor, or the hardware is stereo, and that when you go to add an external effect, that it's set to stereo right here, so that the send and returns are in stereo. So you should see where you have these would need to be configured in stereo, and the hardware would need to be stereo as well. So, but maybe, please, if you could tell us which hardware processor it is. You say you're connecting via ADAT light pipe. Is it an audio converter that's going into your Apollo? That information would be helpful too. Balsa just says, never understood why pro musicians, a lot of interviews state that they use a DAW choice, but they track vocals in Pro Tools and then go back to their DAW. So I think there's a lot of people that do super high-end vocal work entirely in Cubase. So I know my friend, just did he's always very shy about it, but he just did the Barbra Streisand and Paul McCartney duet, and he worked with David Foster, and works with Barbra Streisand and Whitney Houston and all that stuff, and does all his vocals in Cubase. So it could be maybe the engineer, if they go to a different room, that they just simply will use what's in the studio as opposed to the DAW of choice of the producer or engineer. But all right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on. Thanks for joining us. Okay. There you see Razel Zamini checking in from Denmark. We see Jazz2 posted a link on using the SPDIF outs and ADAT outs in our RME interface. Okay, reading through comments. Sorry. All right, so we see Stefan checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, Flyv says, do you have a most useful or favorite logical editor or project logical editor preset? So one I made, and sometimes I will make like a logical editor or project logical editor preset. Trying to think of, like, sometimes I like, being able to colorize based on the name of tracks. I don't really, usually when I'm doing logical editor or project logical editors, I look at it personally kind of like a puzzle, and it's like, oh, how can I do this? Like Pablo had, I think it was Pablo had a question last week on, I want to name, everything in a folder, all the tracks within a folder with a particular name, a certain color. So I don't, and then I think we created one that selected the folder, and then we selected all the tracks within the folder and colorized those. I think those are helpful. I don't really have a particular favorite. I just kind of make them, and hopefully people find, on the live streams, and people find them useful and use them. So I don't have a particular favorite one. I guess the one that I just figured out how to make is usually my current favorite one, because I feel like I solved a little puzzle of some kind. But maybe other people could share their favorite logical editor, project logical editor. I like being able to take like snare drums and, every other snare drum, move the velocity down by 40, something like that. So. All right, Waze Beats says, how do I set up my digital O2R 96 in Cubase? So you can use, if you want to go to a remote control, so, you could take the audio out into your audio interface. So if you have like the MY cards, like to go ADAT, you could, take a number of channels ADAT-wise directly into your audio interface digitally. If you have like a light, ADAT light pipes, but to utilize it as a control surface, if you click on the plus sign, you could just come right over here and say, okay, I want to go to my Yamaha O2R 96, tell it which port it's connected to, and then it's going to function. You define the MIDI control port. I think it's, if memory serves, I'm probably wrong. It could be port 3. I think there's 4 ports that work for the O2R 96, and then you can just simply define a port, and then your O2R 96, once you go into the remote layer, is functioning as a control surface for Cubase for hands-on mixing. See, Val's just saying, oh my God, Zed's house is amazing. Seen a few videos about it. Does he really have the studio underneath the gym in his garage, or did he move? So I think he was building, last time I was there, it was kind of in the dining room, and he was putting it above his garage, but I think they were having all sorts of like zoning stuff that was going on. But he has the coolest kind of Lego installation, kind of in one of the walls is kind of built, and I remember having to take pictures of it so I could show it to my son, but it's like his house gig. He does a house DJ gig in Las Vegas, and it's like a whole club, and it's just like in a pillar, you know, when one of the in his living room, but you kind of look in and it's like this whole club that's done in Legos with him DJing on stage. It was pretty cool. I think you could actually see it in Architectural Digest. So I have a few Steinberg users I've been in their house have been in Architectural Digest. It's pretty cool. Okay, so Val asks, in Hallian Sonic SE, how can I load the default of Xstream, like no preset, only the empty instrument to drop my own samples? Okay, so I think if we come over, let's come to, well, get an instrument, let's get to Hallian Sonic. So I think if we come over and let's load up an Xstream here. All right, and let's just say I'll all right, so if we want to come over, and there's probably a way to clear the sample, but I think if we come over here, we could say save as default preset, and then every time that you open up Hallian Sonic SE or Hallian Sonic, that this would be loaded by default when you load the instrument. So you'll just see like the little preset tab at the top. Try just saving it as the default preset, and I think that could get you where you want to go, Val. Gareth raises a good point about a software studio that he's never got electrocuted by Cubase. You know, Memento, who lives near Genelec, I believe, he has Biamp 1019A speakers from the 90s. All right, Francisco Ruiz asks, how can Cubase toggle to the zoom tool temporarily like Logic? I'm trying, but I haven't figured it out. So one of the things that you could do, like let's say, you know, is one, you don't necessarily have to zoom to toggle the tool. So if you have a mouse scroll wheel, so with no modifiers, I can go up or down. And if I wanted to zoom vertically, I could, you know, so let's come over here. Let me just, so if we want to zoom vertically, just hold down the mouse scroll wheel, hold down, or if we want to zoom vertically, hold down Control or Command, and then hold down Control or Command plus Shift to scroll vertically. So this way you don't have to switch tools. You could just come right here and be able to navigate and zoom. So again, if you want to utilize the Command or Control key, hold down the Shift key, we go vertical, just Command or Control, horizontal, and then you don't have to switch tools. So you can just kind of do that very easily to navigate. So give that a try. So it's not temporarily switching to a different tool. You could always just go to the zoom tool and do that as well. But I think it makes sense just to do your zooming right there without having to temporarily switch to a different tool. So let me know if that makes sense, Francisco. Receipts from J.O. just says, thanks, Greg. And Dan Stenhouse says, thanks, Greg. Appreciate you. So thank you very much. Always appreciate kind comments. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says, hey, Greg, I sent a song called System of the King, and checking the drums, they are all over the place. I don't know what I did to make so many lanes, but they are crazy when I solo. It makes when I solo and make lanes. So generally, it's not going to solo when you make lanes. I will take a look at it. Let me see. I may still have it in my downloads folder. Let me just take a look at it and see if we could see if it's still in. All right, so we have MIDI drums here. So yeah, so it could be, yeah, got a lot of lanes. So it could be like as you recorded the drums, like maybe you did like the kick and snare, maybe you dragged over a pattern, and these are set to merge. So as long as it all sounds good in the end, you know, it's all good. So, but it could be like if you recorded like the kick drum and then you did a second pass of the snare drum, depending upon your MIDI record mode, you could just have it automatically merge. I think the default one makes it into new parts, so that will do stacked, so that your kick could be on one lane, your snare in another, hi-hats on another, so each recording could go onto a different one. But if you merge, they could all go into one single part. So it could be just your MIDI record mode. If you set to merge in the future, that could probably mitigate that, but if it all plays back fine, it's good. All right, so we see Flyv just asking, what's important when editing your EQ? So, you know, there's, so I think it's always a good approach sometimes when people tend not to, you know, do subtractive EQ. So, you know, sometimes, you know, the hard part of working with like a particular project could be, you know, figuring out what exactly is wrong with a project. So if we're doing like EQ on guitar,
The day we first met, that was a long
so let's say if I want to go to the guitar part here. Now sometimes, like as you're working, so let's say, okay, may sound, you know, and people can make EQ choices. I think one thing that people do make a mistake with EQ choices is EQing it in isolation, you know, and I see this with a lot of guitar players who play live, and I could tell it's like, okay, they work on their tones a lot by themselves in a room, and they have like kind of a full frequency spectrum. So, but when they go to play with a band, they realize that their low end is clashing with the bass and like the low, like the kick drum, because they have too much EQ, but it sounds fine and full on their particular, when they're playing by themselves, because they're kind of hearing the full frequency spectrum. But when playing with other people, right, is that you might have to, carve out different EQ frequency spectrums for other musicians and other instruments. So you want to make sure that like this guitar doesn't have like a lot of low end, because if I put this with the bass, now the bass could sound bad, but it's not the bass that's sounding bad, it's the guitar part. So sometimes when we do different EQs, we want to make sure that we're actually, listening to the particular frequencies in context. So now if we put the vocals in, I don't want the EQ, the guitar, encroaching kind of on the vocal. So it's like, okay, we come over. So if I come to the guitar, now that's kind of biting into the vocal frequency range. So often, like when I think about it, a lot of EQ problems can be fixed with great arrangements. And great arrangements could lead to kind of frequencies that don't clash as much. But like if I go to like a sampler track here, like when I'm kind of mixing, things that I like to do is, let's say we just have our piano keyboard here. I'd say, okay, like if we were to think of a drum kit, we have like kick, snare, hi-hat, toms. And these, like the kick doesn't get into frequency of the snare doesn't get into frequency of the hi-hat. The kick sounds good when augmented with like crash cymbals, because we have a balance of the lows and the highs. We have our toms that are kind of musically pitched in the middle. So, I want to have different elements, like maybe my bass and kick drum here. I need to work with in different frequency ranges, the guitars and the vocals and keyboards, and make sure that they're not panned. And I want cymbals. Maybe if I have a high string part, I want each of these to kind of have their own spectrum space, and that could help with your EQs. But don't EQ in isolation. Try to do subtractive EQ, and just kind of listen in context and figure out what exactly is wrong or what's bothering you with the track of why you want to EQ it. Ideally, you want to record it and capture it in a way that you don't have to do a lot of EQ. But sometimes we just get tracks to mix from other people who didn't think like that, and then we have to apply those principles. So just a couple of things that I would do in approaching EQ. And I think another great tip that you could do is, let's come over here. And to me, it's funny when people are always like, oh, you have to always EQ these particular frequencies. But with the EQ, one of my favorite tricks, so let's say, okay, we're in a key of A. So I want to go to my guitar part, and let's go to the EQ. So if I'm looking for a particular frequency, so instead of looking at it in hertz, I'm going to come over here and say A4, since I know I'm in the key of A. So let's say A6. I'm going to type in the note name in the frequency. We'll adjust my Q here to make it a little less. So actually knowing what the key is of the song and being able to put the EQ frequencies and to be able to cut and boost based on the song key, because the EQ frequencies for a song in the key of E versus a song in the key of A are going to be significantly different. So one EQ frequency isn't going to work for all songs. So, think of the musical context and the pitch and the key, the tonal center of the song, because that's going to be a basis for the EQ points and how to choose those as well. All right. See, Gareth is wondering if Uno Memento got the Finnish, brother-in-law discount for his Channel X. All right, Gareth says we need more likes. All right. Uno Memento says he looks at, or Gareth says he looks at the Project Logical editors like a puzzle because it's puzzling to him. All right. Michael Team says it's too scary. It doesn't bite. So. All right, so FlyV is going to be leaving the live stream soon. To catch up with his family. So have a great time with your family. Enjoy the time. All right, so we see Val says, I think default preset is the most used feature in Cubase of his, but he meant to get to extreme content clear, like no settings. All right, so let's see if we could figure it out see if we could clear the sample. I'm sure there's a way to do it. Let me just... Let's see if we do it in the full Hallian, if that makes... We may have a little more control over that. Just seeing if there's a non-macro editor. All right. So obviously we can just drag our own samples in. Let's see. I'll play around with that over the weekend and see if I can have an answer for Tuesday's live stream. And see if we could clear the sample. Just playing one sounds pretty amazing on that. All right. I was just seeing if maybe inside of Hallian that we could get to, not the macro editor, but let me just... see if it allows us to get under the hood a little bit. I'll see if I could, I'll read up on it and do some research over the weekend, Val, and see if I could figure it out. Sorry about that. So Val just says, you could type in the note name and EQ. Wow, what? And so, yeah, it's a good one. All right, Permanent Green just says, that EQ tip was amazing. It's so hard to explain this to people. You should make that a chapter. Excellent stuff. All right, you see Flybees checking out. All right, so we have a question from Bratman Studios. Says, hey, Greg, thanks for looking at that drums and that song. Can I send lanes to different outputs, like within a drum machine? All right, so let's just go back. So it's not the lane that's going to be doing the routing, but rather the particular sound source. All right, so let's come here. So if we open up sound source here, so let's say all right, so we get to the mix console. Probably everything's going to be maybe stereo out. So if we go to our sound source here, you know, we could make, so if we want to come over to, let's say, our directory tree here, all right, so it's just our 808 Studio Kit. All right, so all right, so within Hallion that we could actually but you could create buses inside of Hallion. So let's just come over here. All right, if you go to like the program tree here, you could say, okay, I want to go to the 808 kick. I want to go to my bass drum. And then I think, so I just added the program tree. And then here, I think we could say, okay, I want to add, we'll say a new bus. And then we could basically create buses here to send them to individual outputs. So you could give that a try, Rick, and see if that makes sense with the workflow. So for each of these different groups, the snare group, we could basically, again, if you go to new, so let's come here to our snare and go to new bus. Then each of these could be going out to a different output. We might have to so let's say we have our bass drum here, so I'm going to right click. Let's go to open editor. I want this to go out of output 2. Let's come to our snare, open editor, and go to output 3. So let's see if that, so we can see that our snare samples are isolated here. So again, if you go into the instrument itself, and in this case it's going to be Hallion 7, we want to kind of click on the plus sign, go to the program, select the different sounds here. So you could select like this group of sounds. right click, go to new bus, you add the bus. Then when you go select the bus, right click, go to open editor, and then we could route these to, I think we have 32 stereo outs and a surround output as well. So that's how you could split it. So it's not necessarily from the lanes, because the lanes are just sending MIDI data. The MIDI data is being sent to the virtual instrument, and then we do the routing from within the virtual instrument. So let me know if that makes sense, Rick. So Gerald Ely just says that was awesome. See, John Costigan just says, just think of the mush mixes you've heard and you can resolve it in 60 seconds. Thanks for tips, Craig. So, yeah, I think live sound guys kind of deal more with specific frequencies, dealing with the room a lot more. But for studio guys, I'm always like, tell me the key of the song. And they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. So, all right, wonderful to see Benny checking in from Sweden. All right. See, Bratman Studio just says, wow, I don't know how you remembered to do that, but thanks, I'll experiment with that. So yeah, Hallian's just like incredibly powerful and flexible, and sometimes, that when you have something incredibly powerful and flexible, it gives you a lot of options, and lots of options can lead to complexity, but it allows you to do and accomplish many tasks that you wouldn't think of otherwise. So, it's always interesting. I find, new programs that always say, oh, it's so simple and fresh and direct. And it's always that way until the programs keep adding features. And it's in software design, how do you add features without imposing complexity on existing workflows? It's always a balance. But yeah, give that a try, Rick. All right, so I know we had a couple more questions that were mailed in. Let me go to those. All right, so we had a question, how to fix audio files that import at the wrong pitch. Okay, so a lot of times, and I think in this scenario, the person was auditioning different audio files here. So let's create a new project. And I will change my sample rate, let's say to 48K. So now sometimes when people audition different loops, so let's say we're doing.
Right. You're looking right. Biting my lips.
All right, and if you drop it into the project and play it, and it plays a different sample, or the pitch is slightly different. So how to fix that is it's probably auditioning at one sample rate, let's say 48K, and it's playing back at 44.1 or vice versa. So to mitigate that, what we could do is there's a preference, and this is one of those, and you may find it under preferences or in Mac OS under settings. If we go to, let's say under editing audio, you could just say, and it's one of these things like when we go to import a file, we may get, the first time you do it, you may get a little warning message that says, open. So let me just import an audio file here. So we'll see this message. So we'll just say import audio file. All right, so I want to import this, and we'll get this message. Do we want to copy it to the project folder? Do we want to convert the sample rate to the project settings? Now, a lot of times what happens is people say, don't show me that again. And so now if you import a file and, you have that not to be shown again, it could be the wrong sample rate. So one thing that's always good is when you go to the preferences, if you go to editing audio, just always choose to convert to the project settings. That way, as the audio is imported directly into the project, it will automatically convert it to the project sample rate for you, so you don't run into any pitch differences. All right. Let's see if we have more questions. All right. Let me clear my throat. Okay. See, Michael, teams granted. John Costigan, 1 gallon of amaretto. Sorry. 1 gallon of amaretto and chocolate ice cream, and he's pleased. See, Michael Team says he'll be going back tonight and look at this again. So many details today. All right. Tim K just says amazing tips and tricks. Here says one must always remember the coconut, but his coconut doesn't remember anything. All right, Tim K just says all you have to remember is we love Cubase even more. It'll be indexed for a short-term memory challenge. All right. All right, so Graham Witcher, great to see you on from Oxford, England, is it's saying it's hot in the UK right now, and he's requesting some ice cream. And remember that we have to, Michael Teams, you have to give Graham it in the metric system, but 1 gallon of Texas Select chocolate ice cream. All right, let's see. I think we may have had one more question that was mailed in. Sorry, let me just mute. Okay, so we had a question. It says, one small question. How can I change the order of inserts in the channel strip on the left? And this was from the picture, the sends. Is this possible after inserting inserts here and attached a screenshot? All right, so let me just go ahead and let's add some effects tracks. So let's say, okay, I want a chorus. I want a delay. I want, let's say, reverb. Okay, so let's say now when I go to add a track, now there's a preference here that we discussed in the last live stream that could have an impact. So if we come over here, let's go to our preferences and we go to VST, we could connect sends automatically for each newly created channel. All right, so if that is checked, and I'll go ahead and hit apply, I see that I've added my effects in chorus, studio delay, and references, sends 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to add some audio tracks. And as we add some audio tracks here, that when we look at the tracks and we'll expand this, we'll go to, let's say, our sends. we can see that the sends are matched directly with our sends of the tracks that we added here. So we have chorus, studio delay, reverence. So these will kind of load up, and when the question had indicated the picture of the inspector on the left hand side, so when we go to our sends, that we see chorus, studio. So we wanted, the question was how to change the order of these. So I could just say, okay, I want the multi-delay to be, the studio delay to be the first send. I want the reverence, reverb to be the second, and I want the chorus to be the third send. So when we look at this, we can see that this one particular channel is going to be different. So you could just go directly to the channels and reorganize your channels to change the sends directly here as needed. So if you wanted to come over and be able to adjust the sends. Now the order with sends, just so you're aware, isn't so critical. When we look at a particular channel, we can see that we're going to have our inserts and our channel strip. Now these, the order of inserts in the channel strip can be critical because, as we do inserts, this will go through serially. So like if I put a compressor here, so let's say we put the black valve compressor, and then I want to put like one of the Pultec EQs. So the compressor comes and feeds, and after the signal is compressed, it goes into the EQ, and then let's say into a filter, and then into, let's say, a shimmer reverb. So this, is processing in this particular order. And the channel strip can work the same way. So if we want to say, okay, I want my noise gate, I want to have my tube compressor, I want to have my de-esser, say magneto, and my limiter. So now when we come over here, these are all kind of going in order. So the signal from the compressor is being compressed, then it's being compressed and EQ'd, then it's being compressed, EQ'd, filtered, compressed, EQ'd, and running through the reverb. Then that goes to the order of our noise gate, tube compressor, our EQ, our de-esser. So these are all a signal, but when we do the sends aren't serialized. So the sends are sent in parallel. So the same signal will go out to the chorus, the studio delay, or the reverb, but changing the order isn't going to affect the sound because these are all, this signal is coming in, being processed through the channel strip, and then it goes out to here, it goes out to here, and it goes out to here. So these aren't affected by the order. Now if you wanted to change the order of the inserts, you could just kind of drag and drop them like so. We could also do that with our channel strip. So we could change the order here, and this could matter because of the processing order. And if we wanted our channel strip to come before the inserts, what we could do is just click on this little icon here, and we could just say, okay, now the channel strip comes before the inserts, or the inserts come before the channel strip. So, we can physically change the order here, maybe if you want to, just for organization purposes, but the order here has no effect on the actual sound because the sends are going to be kind of parallel processed, and the inserts and the channel strip will be serially processed. Okay, let's jump back to live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, Tim K says that the UK does ice cream in imperial pints. That's the ice cream measurement. So I'll keep that in mind. I'll be in Ireland next week on vacation. All right, Uno Memento says we're close to 100. Can we get it? So 100 likes, all right. All right, John Costigan asked, Greg, I'm making a classic user mistake. I'm trying to copy and drag a part to the track below, and I'm dragging in timing errors. This was easy. Can you remind me? Thanks and regards from John. All right. So if we have an event and we want to kind of constrain the direction of the edit, so let me just add a couple of audio tracks here. Okay, so let's say I want to drag this track. So I'm going to move it, let's say, vertically first. Now, when I move it vertically, if I hold down the control or the command key, now I can't move it horizontally because I chose to move it vertically. So now I can move it anywhere I want. Now I can only move it vertically right now because I'm holding my control or my command key down. So if you always want to keep it in the same spot, move it downward first, then hold the control or command key, and then release, and that will constrain the direction. Now, conversely, if I move an event horizontally first, and then hold down my control or command key, I cannot move it to a different track. It will constrain the direction of the edit only on that track because the first movement I did is what is constrained. So again, if I come here, I move it, okay, I moved it in time, I copied it, okay, but if I hold down, before releasing the mouse key, hold down the command or control key, it's going to lock in place. And since I moved it vertically first, now it's locked in vertically. If I move it horizontally first, now it will be locked in horizontally. So try just moving it downward or upward, and then holding down control or command, and that will restrain the direction of the movement for you. Let me know if that works for you, John. So hopefully you're just one modifier key away from happiness. All right. So we see Michael Teams says the weatherman does a great job. You could be wrong 100% of the time and still keep your job. All right. So we see from Music Live just says nice. All right, Mark Chiambo, great to see you on. And he just says, hey, Greg, is there a way to lock a marker to an event so that when I move the event, the marker moves as well? Let's give it a try. All right, so let's add some markers here. Okay, so let's say I drop a marker here and drop marker here. All right, so let's see if I group these together. So I'm going to hit Control or Command plus the letter G. And now, no, it doesn't look like it keeps them grouped. Let me just try one more time. So if they're both selected, so let's say if I come here and select both of them, they will be moved together, but I don't think there's a way to automatically. So now they will move and kind of keep their proportionality. So if this marker is in the middle and I select the marker and the event, they're kind of together, but I don't think that there's a way to lock them. Let's see if I come over here and if we put it into a folder. So if I put them into a folder, and this is, I realize a workaround. So even the marker track in a folder doesn't. So I don't know of a way to do it. I could play around with it some more. But if you select both of them, you could move them together. But I don't think that there's a way to kind of link them together. Let me just. I'll just take a look at the marker settings and see if there's anything I'm missing. Yeah, so I think you would have to, select both of them and move them together, like so. I'll play around with it a little more over the weekend and see if anything else kind of pops in my head. Sorry about that, Mark. Jazz Dude is sharing good advice. It says, with inserted effects, always keep in mind the weakest part of the chain determines the whole performance, so don't add lots of stuff you don't really understand. Less is more. So. All right, so we see from Bratman Studios, says, Greg, I took the glue tool to the drums and got all the lanes together except lane 22. That shows all the notes in the MIDI. Example, kicks and snares, but appear individually. Editor nice. Now looking to separating the outputs. All right, let me see if I could take a look at lane 22 for you and the drums. So one quick way of merging a bunch of tracks together like that, in case you don't know, like if we have lots of MIDI drums, so if you grab the glue gun and hold down the Alt or Option key, now when we look at, so we'll come over here, so all right, so I don't see a lane 22, but that could be a way to immediately kind of join all of your lanes together as one event. So you could give that a try, but now you could separate the sounds in Hallian. All right, Pawan Kumar says, hey, Greg, in the media bay and the samples folder, which are in the favorites folder, don't show up in a structured manner of how you save them. Example, kicks, snares, etc. appear individually. I also posted a video on Facebook. Yeah, so when you go to a particular folder, so let's come over here to the file browser and say, okay, I posted... So let's say I go to the Amos Moses folder here and I add it as a favorite. Okay, so we'll say June 13th, 2025. Okay, so, but this doesn't necessarily break everything down. So it's not like the favorites folder doesn't include subfolders. I could see reasons for and against that. Like if you're just looking for content. So when we jump home, we'll come over here, we'll see, so we go to the file browser, we can see that there are subfolders here within this particular song. Let's jump back to our favorites folder and we'll come here to our June 13th. So now it's just going to show everything that's within that folder, but it doesn't break it down. So currently when you add to favorites folder, it's just going to be one level and it doesn't contain subfolders. So I could see arguments for and against, but I'll pass it along as a feature request regardless. All right, so we see Gareth has to take off. Hope you have a great weekend and continue to improve in your health. All right. So Gareth says, looking forward to side B bass lines. So yeah, got it all kind of assembled yesterday. So hopefully get some done this weekend. All right. All right, so we see from John Costigan says, Cubase Greg, that time it actually soaked in. Thank you and have a great Father's Day. Thank you. Hope you have a great weekend as well. All right, we see Best Korean Jesus lurking as usual. So hope you're doing great in San Diego. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. Looks like we're at the end of questions. See people who have forgotten to write questions down. Let's see if there's any other questions. And we see that Michael Teams is granted Best Korean Jesus 1 gallon of Stealth pomegranate ice cream. All right, so we see Bratman Studios says, Greg, I kept clicking in the drum lane until all lanes became one, then clicked clean lanes. Yeah, that'll work as well. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions. It's probably a nice summer weekend for those of us in the northern hemisphere. Everyone's looking forward to getting their weekend started. All right, so we see Jazzy Lamel, great to see you on, says, I have two. First one is impossible if I had more memory to 64. I just saw it got retracted. Let's see if it comes back. Let's see, I got 6 gold trophies from Michael Teams. Thank you for that. All right, we see Val's heading to the kitchen, wishing everyone a nice weekend. All right, let's see if Jazzy Lamel has his question, if it comes back. All right, Uno Memento says we need 2 more likes. All right. All right, we'll see. All right, Drums Clark says, when I import a Dorico project into Cubase 14 Pro, how do I get the audio from the MIDI tracks? I think that they have to be assigned. Let me just come over and let me import Dorico project here. I think while it gets all the MIDI notes over in the scoring, that you may have to install again. So let's come over. Okay, so let's say we'll come here, open this, import it. So I don't think that it's actually assigned to a particular instrument. So now when we go into our notation, we could see that the notation all carries over and we just need to assign it to a particular instrument. So if we come over here, let's add an instrument track. I want it to be in, we'll just choose Hallian 7. All right, and now that we have an instrument loaded, so it doesn't make, well, it gets all the data over, all the notes, the notation, then you could reassign it to different instruments to play back. So I don't think that the instruments used in Dorico carry over. I'm sure it's being worked on, but now at least we could take your Dorico project and then, get that with all of the typical notation, all the work in Dorico that's been done, and carry that over directly into Cubase. All right, you see Uno Momento's going fishing tomorrow. I think you live off of a lake, if I remember you describing it. Okay, Jazzy Lamel asks, is there a way to get a higher track count with more memory to like 64 gigabytes of RAM? So, it could depend on your project. Always having more memory having more memory can't hurt. So, but you have to determine what's causing, is it your CPU usage that's using, so let's say you're doing like a rock band and you have 10 compressors on every track. So that could be causing, your audio performance could be high as a result of that. And as you're working, it's the CPUs that are getting, or the audio performance is really high. And adding more memory doesn't increase the audio performance in a way that is giving you more kind of CPU horsepower. If you're running out of tracks with something like virtual instruments, they're using samples, think of an orchestral template. We're doing film scores with lots of orchestral instruments. Having more memory in your system will definitely help kind of mitigate, when you're running into audio performance issues. So you have to figure out if you're trying to load up, 128 gigabytes of samples into 32 gigabytes, that could, cause your system to overload. If you have 64, that gives it a lot more of a buffer. But if your project is more based on actual the number of plugins that are being used in the plugins, and the audio processing is high because of plugin usage, then more memory could help a little bit, but it may not be as significant. Okay, and see, second question. Next question, is it possible to know the shortcut for quick link? Okay, so if we have a number of tracks for quick link, so let's say if we come over here, let's just add number of tracks. So to enable quick link, it's just going to be Alt or Option plus Shift, and you could turn that on temporarily. So if you wanted to turn it on, you could just enable the quick link here. But if you wanted to come, so let's say we have our tracks laid out for us here, and I wanted to do a quick link on all these tracks. So to temporarily turn it on, you could just hold down Alt or Option plus Control. When I release that, I could move one at a time, but now I have all these tracks selected. When I hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, now at that point they're going to be quick linked. Without that held, each of these tracks will be function independently. Now, if Quick Link is turned on by the icon here, we could move all those. If we hold down Alt or Option, we could temporarily disable it by holding down Alt or Option. So if I come here, say, okay, now if I hold down my Alt key by itself, we could disable the Q link. But in general, if it is turned off, Alt and Shift, Alt or Option plus Shift enables it. And you could do that. And if it's enabled and you want to temporarily disable it, just hold down the Alt key. So you can say, oh, that needs to be a little louder. Now I could move all those together as a single entity within a group. All right, Uno Mementos wishing everyone a great weekend. See you on Tuesday, and he wants everyone to have a beer. Okay, so we see from Drums Clark says, I saw that, create instrument track, drop to new track. So let's say if I come here, let's add an instrument track. So if we choose the Grand 3, we'll come there. And so let me know if there's, so that way the instrument track is automatically loaded and we could load up our different piano instruments. Okay. Okay, so we see a question from John Barry. Hi, Greg. How does Quick Link work with sends? Is it the slot number or the send effects? I think it's going to be the slot number, but let's take a look. Okay, so let's come over here to our sends. So I will use my Quick Link to add my so let's come here, let's do reverence and send 1 for all those tracks. Let me just start fresh here. And let me just check my preference settings. Okay, let me add 2 more effects checks. All right, so now, all right, so we can see our sends, and let me go ahead and switch the order of some of the sends here. All right, so now when we want to activate the Quick Link, across all these channels. Yeah, so it's going to be based on the send and not necessarily the effect itself. So, because what we're doing here in the mixer is we're just quick linking send to, and wherever send to goes to on that particular track is what will be linked. So it won't link all of the sends with mod machine on it. Okay, so we have a question from Roland Stuff, who says, "Hi Greg, after producing a multi-track song, what's the simplest way to write a simple score that just shows the basic chords? And importantly, the main vocal melody, please. I have Dorico 6. Thanks." Okay, so what I would do, so if you're making a quick lead sheet, I would use a chord track. I would come over here. Let's get to the chord track. I'm going to drop a guitar or MIDI part to the chord track. I'm going to go into the vocal. And let's go into VariAudio. All right, and I'll just come here. All right, so we'll see our VariAudio here. And at this point, when we see under choose function, I'll say extract MIDI. And we could have it, when we go to the extract MIDI, we could have it automatically go to a new MIDI track. Then I would, and you may have to clean up the MIDI performance a little bit. I would come here, go into the score editor, and since we have the chord track automatically defined, when we go to the score editor, we could see that, let me just, and if you notice that you have like the chord tracks automatically laid out for you, let me just come here. So if you have a lot of like unnecessary chord tracks and you're seeing the tempo on every single one, if we go to your tempo track, and I'm going to select all events, and we could choose for them not to show up in the score. So I'll choose to hide. And let's go to our score here. So let's say, okay, I want to go to the instrument settings, and we want to set this to our instrument. And we'll say, okay, we just want it to be singer, bass, and now we could just, and obviously I could kind of clean up the audio interpretation, but now we see the chords, we could see the melody, and if you wanted to insert lyrics, we could do that as well. So we could just come over here, click on the text, and say, okay, let's put lyrics in, and you could just start typing away and entering your lyrics. And if you want to go to verse 2, we could just say, okay, let's put the lyrics in, click, hit the down arrow, and now we're entering in verse 2. And then you could create a lead sheet pretty easily. So generate the chords from a MIDI or an audio part to a chord track. Go into go to the vocal melody, and you could play along, or you could use the VariAudio. You may have to clean up some of the segments within VariAudio. Come here, and under functions, extract MIDI, and then go to that MIDI part. Go into the score editor. You may have to change the instrument if one hasn't been defined, and you could see the chords automatically laid out with the melody for you. Okay, so we see drums, Clark. Let me see if this is. It says I saw that create an instrument track, drop down to create, and it says mouse one note at a time or use a MIDI keyboard to input notes. So it could really, if you're asking, if, you could, input with a mouse all the time if you want, but, quickly if you wanted to, and depending upon the part, like if you were doing a very complex piano part, I may play it on a keyboard if you have the skills, but there's other tools like I don't have good keyboard skills personally. But if I wanted to come up with a particular pattern, another tool where you could create music without necessarily, going crazy. Let's say if I wanted to, let's see if I have. I'll just add one here. So let's add an instrument track, and then I'll do, let's say, retrolog, and I want to do this as a pattern event. Now, once we have this done, I'll just come over here. We'll just load up a quick preset. And if I wanted to make kind of my own patterns, from kind of a musical context. So let's say if I wanted to make, a MIDI pattern here, I'm just going to choose, let's say, and we can see our different pitches here. I'll make this like a pentatonic scale, so you could choose whatever pitches you want. All right, so we'll say, let's go ahead and all right, so now let's say I'll solo this particular track, and if I want it to come over and just say, okay, let's just make and then if I wanted to duplicate that pattern and add on to it as a variation and duplicate that pattern, so now we could just kind of come over here and say, okay, let's, so even if you don't have great keyboard skills, we could come over and just say, okay, I want this to be pattern 1, going to pattern 2, to pattern 3, to pattern 1. And now as we play, we could have this on our timeline. So let's say if I just come here, let's switch to patterns. So now, like without having to have a keyboard, we can just kind of come over here. And I'll take it off loop. Even though it's kind of cool sounding. So you don't necessarily, but depending upon the music that you're doing, you could just kind of do pattern-based stuff with the pattern editor as well and come up with like really good stuff. All right. See, John Costigan is giving thanks to the group. It says thanks to all of you for your collective cognition and superior skill set. All right. Graham Witcher is wishing everyone a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. John Barry just says thanks for clarification. Jazz Dude says we have 106 likes. All All right, Roland Stuff says, thanks, Greg. It looks like the score editor's flexible addition to Cubase. Creating a lead sheet seems simpler than I thought previously. The music for my music usually looked cluttered. Thanks. Yeah, so, and I think we'll see just great integration coming between Dorico and Cubase now that we kind of have the same code base for the score editor, and we're just really in the first generation of it. So I'm excited to see I'm really excited to see as it develops. All right, Soren just says, Greg, can you understand why I cannot scroll with the scroll wheel on the inserts on the farthest left panel? Scroll from inserts to sends and all cannot be done. It is stopped with the patch, I think. Okay, so let's say on this track, let me just load up some all right, so I'll just load up some inserts here to populate some different plugins. Okay, so now when I scroll here, so let's say if I have my EQ set up, I have so maybe if you're on top, it may not scroll, but if you kind of hover towards the right, that you could scroll. So let's say now if I adjust my EQ, I could come over here. So maybe directly in the middle, it may not scroll, or if you scroll directly from a header, so it may not allow you to scroll like in the middle, but maybe from a header, but it seems like it's working. Or if you go maybe over to the right side to see if it works. But let's say if I come here and I try to scroll within a zone, it may not allow me to do it. But if you go to a header, you could scroll there, or try scrolling over from the right-hand side there. All right, Drums Clark asks if there is a way to import PDF sheet music, make a request for that. So I know that, like Dorico, and, came from, the development team was previously with Sibelius, and Sibelius and Finale both had scanning options that were available. And it seemed like the greatest thing ever, except for, by time you looked for, but I don't think it actually worked very well. There are a couple of like iOS and maybe Android apps that allow you to scan a piece of music and convert it to a music XML, which could be imported into Dorico or imported directly into Cubase. Their accuracy, I wouldn't completely trust it on like a mission critical thing. And you may spend more time correcting like little subtle things to get the music in correctly. So while it seems like, oh, it's so awesome, you can just do this, it's not as easy as it looks. And I think that, Finale and Sibelius had both dropped support for scanning because it was so unreliable. So, but there may be some apps that help with that. And we see, Jazz Dude's already so good he's posted a link. All right, so we see Soren says, thanks, Greg, from the header works on the scrolling in the inspector. Yeah, so I think that they may, want you to be, there are adjustments where you could adjust, the parameters depending on preferences. So that could be why. So if we want to look at, and this is a new preference that was added in 1403 under control. So here we could enable, so, depending on the behavior. So if I'm here, I could adjust the parameters without it scrolling. So it could be to maintain consistency, or we could just completely disable in scrollable areas, or disable the mouse parameter adjusting parameters like in the mixer, where people, we would get this complaint a lot. Oh, I accidentally went here and I moved my mouse scroll wheel and the mixer volume changed. So now we could eradicate that as well. All right. See if there's any more questions that come in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. If you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that so you're notified of future live streams. And we usually do these on Tuesdays and Fridays. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the live stream, next Friday and the following Tuesday, there won't be live streams. I'll be in Ireland on vacation. So and then we'll resume probably all of July. We may take, I think, 4th of July, which is an American holiday. We may not do a live stream then, but maybe we'll do it on the Thursday before, depending. I'll ask everyone as we get closer to that. But we'll see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Okay. All right. So it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank again everyone for taking time to learn more about your Steinberg products. And I think we crossed over our 40,000 questions with this live stream, according to Jan. So hopefully those 40,000 questions have been answers and discussions have been helpful for a lot of people. And you could check them all out at cubaseindex.com. And Bratman Studios wishing Happy Father's Day to all. Yeah, so I want to extend a Happy Father's Day. I'm not sure if it's Father's Day in every country. I know sometimes it's different in different countries. But to all the dads out there, everyone have a wonderful Father's Day. And we will see everyone back on Tuesday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the weather. If you are having great weather, I think we're supposed to have a bunch of rain coming here over the weekend. But just looking forward to seeing everyone back on Tuesday. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. And goodbye.